Let's go 3, 2, 1. Dang it. Come on, board. This thing's working slow today. Oh, there we go. All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Persuasion by the Pint. I'm Jonathan Taylor, along with
Sean McCool.
Sean, we've got a good one today, man. Another military guy on, second week in a row, talking sales and negotiation from an ex-international arms dealer. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, we're going to get flagged on YouTube for sure.
Possibly.
Yeah.
We're going to mix in some other stuff too, because I was studying up on our guest. He's got a few different things going out there. He's into publishing. He does a lot of marketing work for book publishers out there, writers, authors, which we'll get into as well. But I'm anxious to have him on, man. Should be a good conversation today.
Yeah, from books to bullets, or bullets to books, I guess is his story. So yeah, we'll cover the gamut and talk about some persuasion and some good beers and maybe another B word.
Perhaps.
Yes.
All right, let's welcome him in because I know he has a drink.
Oh, yes.
And he's got a stronger drink. We might be the wusses here today.
I know.
With what he's got. Welcome to the show, Dave. How you doing, man?
Hey, guys. Glad to be here.
All right, so hold that glass up again.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Ooh, look, fancy glass and everything, man.
I know. More of a Blantons and a Glencairn.
Nice.
Ooh, good stuff. Good stuff. And a fancy glass at that.
Yeah. So fancy. Those Navy guys, I tell you.
Oh, there's definitely a lot of drinking that goes on when you negotiate
no doubt.
Weapons.
I bet.
So I want to welcome you to all of our listeners out there. We've got Dave. Do you pronounce it Chesson?
That's correct. Yep. Chesson. Dave
Chesson, a military veteran with the former U.S. Navy, former international arms dealer. We got a lot to talk about there. But you also are founder and owner of Kindlepreneur. We're going to get into that. You're going to be talking to us about some marketing when it comes to books, publishing, which will be interesting today. I know a lot of our listeners out there looking at publishing books, writing, marketing books. So we'll have a lot to cover today, right?
Yeah, should be fun. This is the kind of show though that is kind of the origin of the show, right? So Dave, Jonathan and I used to get together at a pub in Knoxville, Tennessee on a Friday afternoon, drink some beers and just talk shop. So I feel like that's what this show is going to be today, is just kind of three guys talking shop, let it go wherever it goes. Got some cool topics to cover here. So I'm looking forward to it for sure.
Sounds great. Absolutely.
Now, I noticed there's another website. You can tell us a little more on this, Gun University, which you're a co-founder of. And so I got to say, you go by Roy. Is it Roy or Dave?
Yeah, I write under Roy for Gun University and Dave for kind of the other side. But in truth, I actually run and own 7 different companies. So
nice.
Keep them all straight.
Nice.
So it's good to you. Do you have different names for each one or just?
No, just those 2. Those are the only ones where I actually put myself in it. I own a couple of software companies, software development company.
Awesome.
Also a job hiring system called a applicant tracking system, and some other fun things.
That's cool. That's great. Well, we got to give you a guy that owns 7 businesses gets a huge applause.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, before we go down into those rabbit holes, let's cover our beverages today. Dave, tell us a little bit more about your beverage and what you decided to bring on here. You went.
Well, Blantons has always been a really good bourbon. The problem is it got really popular and now it's like ridiculously hard to find. Most of the times when the stores get it, they actually put it in the back and you have to ask them if they have it. But I have a couple of bottles of it. I would say that I'm more of a Weller's fan, but Blantons is just a very smooth bourbon. I think it was the first that actually got me caught on. I moved into Nashville and I always thought, when you say whiskey or bourbon, I'm like, what is that? You think of all the ones in college, Jack Daniels
and Jim Beam.
And then a buddy of mine actually gave me a pour of Blantons. I was like, wow, there's a lot of things going on here. This is really nice. And I think I was hooked at that point.
Yeah. Once you kind of get into it, especially now, it's, 10 years ago, you didn't have as many bourbons and as you do now. So now they're coming out with all these craft bourbons that have, a little bit of flavors in them and all kinds of cool stuff. So it's kind of a cool time to enjoy bourbon for sure.
Absolutely. Although it's getting harder and harder to find the good ones.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Now it's getting into marketing where it's the label and the bottles and all that kind of stuff. But we're a big fan of the Japanese whiskeys.
Oh yeah.
And which isn't bourbon, but still it's in the same realm.
Yep.
But so yeah, cool. Very nice. I don't think I've ever had a Blantons. I'll have to go hunt it down here in Austin.
Yeah, I think it took off after John Wick. I think that was the start. In the first movie, that's the one that he's brought while he's getting the surgery and he's drinking it,
That explains it.
Yep, that and a whole bunch of John Wick guns just took off. So that was some good marketing for that entire
absolutely.
movie.
Very cool.
Yeah, I noticed that was one of your favorite movies, right?
Yeah, actually,
which one?
It really is. If I had to choose an action film, I really enjoy the first one.
The first one, okay. Yeah, cool. I mean, they're all good, but I would always generally gravitate to the first one because that's where everything started. All right.
Unless Fast and Furious, I think, has gotten probably better as it goes. I think it's crazy.
I think so.
Like, yeah, some of them are not as good as others, but
I think I stopped after the last 9. What is there, like 20 now?
I don't know, but yeah, now they're doing spinoffs. So it's pretty amazing. That's a pretty amazing though track record to roll out 9 sequels and actually have them all sell. That's pretty cool. It's not like it was Halloween number 13 or nobody watched. So, well, Jonathan, what do you got over there? You said you had something special today.
Yeah, so I've got one from Highwire. This is one that I've never had before. It's a 10W40, which I have had before, but it's a banana split, right?
What?
Banana split.
I love the 10W40. I've had that before. So,
and if you weren't aware, it does see on the label, it says it contains alcohol.
Okay.
Shocking.
Yeah.
8%. So let's see. Let me give you a little rundown, a quick rundown here. This is a seasonal, very special, is inspired by an ice cream shop classic, obviously, brewed with banana, cocoa nibs, vanilla, lactose, all the stuff you would normally expect. This stout is not motor oil, but it is just super chocolatey sweet and elevated by a tropical banana flavor. I'm not so sure about this, but we'll see. I don't like these tropical flavors, but
we'll see.
But we'll see.
I feel like I've had that before. Have we had that on the show?
I don't think so. We've had a 10W40, but not a banana. I don't think we've had a banana split.
Yeah, it might have been a different
go back and look.
Brand. All right, so I've got a local here from Austin, Blue Owl Brewing.
Okay.
Professor Black Sour Cherry Stout. So I've never really gone into the sour beers, but this brewing company, that's all they do is sours.
Yep.
So, they got a whole page on their site about the souring process and everything. So I went as close to, I went to the stout section of their sours, and we'll see how this goes. So it's a sour cherry stout, 40 IBUs, 6.1% ABV. It's got a sour rating of 75 SU. So a sumptuous cherry stout with a swanky finish, whatever that means. Roasted malt with complex dark fruit and tart cherry flavor. So we'll see.
We'll see.
We shall see.
All right. Well, cheers, gentlemen. Oh, go ahead.
Cheers.
I gotta wait for Sean.
You gotta at least let me pour, man. Here, I'll pour half so we can get started.
There we go. All right.
Smells good.
That's good. All right. So, Dave, we give a rating of 1 to 5 pints, 5 being the best. We don't have too many 5s on here. So we've only had a handful of 5s since, what is this, 190 episodes or something like that. So not too many get that rating. So we'll start with you first with your bourbon, because I know that's going to be good. That's going to be right up there. And you can go by the dust. You can go point something. So
Yeah, that's hard to say. I would have to give it a 4, close to 5, and I can only say that because I did a blind bourbon taste testing. I hosted it here in Nashville, and we had a whole slew of them, and that one actually turned out to be my favorite when I didn't know what it was. So I guess I have to say it's my favorite.
Very cool.
I mean, I haven't had Pappy, I haven't, all the big names or anything like that, but it's got to be up there.
Sure. So somewhere between 4.5 to 5, somewhere in there.
Somewhere in there.
Okay.
When I didn't know what it was, it turned out to be my favorite.
Perfect. That's a good endorsement.
All right. Sean, how about you?
Yes, this is definitely the sour lives up to its name, so that's kind of different.
Another you won't finish, right?
I don't know. It's kind of interesting. It's not something I would, drink all afternoon or anything for sure, but it is interesting. It's a different kind of taste. So for now, I'm going to give it like a 3.5, but I have a feeling this is one of those beers that as it airs, grows on you. And as you drink it, kind of grows on you. It's kind of shocking at first, but I think it's one of those that you kind of get to enjoy it once you get over the initial, kind of like Sour Patch Kids. Like, the first one's always, but you like them as you keep emptying the bag.
Yeah.
I know Dave probably
a palate.
You steal your kids' Sour Patch Kids?
Only after Halloween.
Yeah. So, my daughter's 20 and she still buys them. Yeah. My daughter's 20 and still loves them, so I still sneak a few here and there. But
nice.
All right.
So I'm giving mine a 3.2. Not a big fan on the banana. Stout, stout's good, solid, but you can certainly, you could definitely taste that. I don't taste banana split. I just kind of taste banana flavor. Yeah, not a good combination. So
banana and beer. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's the aftertaste is when it really hits you. Not so much when you first, take a drink, but it certainly hits you on that aftertaste. So I'm gonna give it 3, maybe a 3.1. 3.1.
I mean, banana and peanut butter works. Peanut butter and beer works, but apparently banana and beer, not so much. Oh, well.
I don't get the whole banana peanut butter thing.
Really?
I don't know. Did Elvis is he the one that kicked that one off?
Dude, I love that. It's one of my favorite sandwiches. Yeah.
All right, Dave, I got something to talk to you about. You've got,
all right.
You got kids, right? How many kids do you have?
I've got 3. I've got a 21-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 7-year-old.
Well, that's what I was going to get to, because when I'm looking at the camera here, and you told me last week you were taking your oldest, your 21-year-old, I think, back to college, right? Was it last?
No, she plays softball for Lehigh University, and so I went out to go watch one of her series against Lafayette.
Sweet. So that's awesome, man. But I'm just looking at you. You don't look like you have a 20. I'm sure you get that a lot. You don't look like you have a 21-year-old. So I don't know what your secret is, but maybe I should stick to bourbon.
It was even more so is like, when I was doing arms dealing for the U.S. government, you'd be meeting with the Secretary of Defense for this country or the president of this country, and here I am, and I'm like, so what is it that you want? And I don't know, it was always one of those things that I had to fight with. Sure. I also same thing with working in the U.S. embassies, the ambassadors, well, I can't do that for you, sir, and here I am, this little baby face, telling him that, and it taught me a lot. You can't just go in there and act like everybody else when you got this kind of persona and you're trying to pull that sort of authority. So,
good point. Yeah, that's right. Because right, in sales, people sometimes, especially these older guys, seniority. I mean, and you dealt with some pretty high level. We'll get into that, but I'm sure that was always in the back of your mind. These guys think I'm like, 18 years old when I come in.
Yeah, there was a lot of things I did to kind of change the situation, I guess, and kind of put it in a better light than
reframed it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Reframed it. Good word.
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background before we get into the topic? We kind of teased at the beginning, background in international arms sales. Before that, you were in the military. I don't know how many years. Why don't you give us some background on yourself, and we'll jump right into talking sales, negotiation, and then marketing your books.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, the quick and dirty on it was I started in the Navy. I was a nuclear engineer on submarines. Then I kind of moved into nuclear weapon security. After a bit of that, I decided I want to kind of pivot and go into something else. So I studied to become what they call a foreign area officer, a FAO. I got my master's degree in East Asia, became fluent in Mandarin Chinese, kind of labeled myself a Chinese specialist. Worked as a liaison between South Korea and the U.S. fleet. So I was on board a lot of South Korean warships. And the funny thing is that, I became fluent in Mandarin Chinese, and then they sent me to Korea. And they don't speak Chinese, nor do they speak English. So here I am on a foreign warship trying to figure things out and help them and pass information back and forth between the two countries on operations. And yeah, needless to say, I learned that it's super important to become best friends with translators. So did that for a while. And then immediately I was pivoted into a position called ODC, which is Office of Defense Cooperation. Usually what happens is there's an ODC attached to each embassy, and that person is by definition an international arms dealer. That person is in control of all weapon sales, military operations, also a lot of reconstruction, building of hospitals, like all these components that bring in U.S. interests. And in essence, what you really have to do is you got to be the guy that finds the mutual ground between like 5 different entities. Those different entities can be the host nation, the ambassador, the State Department, the COCOM commander, and the businesses, right? The actual guys who manufacture the weapons. Well, you got to find that common ground, bring them all together, get them all to agree, and then you approve and move things forward. And so I really got into that sector, traveled to a whole bunch of countries, represented them. And then at that point, I was like, all right, I'm good. And I actually got out of the military. I did 11 years active duty, 2 more years in the reserves. But when I was in Korea, I actually started to build up my own business. My wife and I talked about what we wanted to do and whether or not my goal was to be an admiral. And the answer was nope, not at all. But she didn't want me to leave this traveling 9-to-5 job to another traveling 9-to-5 job. And so we started looking at how we can build some kind of exit plan out of the military while I'm on the other side of the world. So I couldn't create mom and pop shops, or brick and mortar or any of that kind of thing. I couldn't do anything that required time, for me to be up when America's up, for me to fulfill things. I needed to find business structure that allowed me to work when I could and have it grow as I'm working a full-time job. And so that led me into website development, SEO, and self-publishing books. And so I started doing those things on the side, was able to build up a business to the point it was making more money than I was in the military, got out. And at that point, things really started to expand. I got into Kindlepreneur, my main website. And by the way, I was selling about $10,000 to $15,000 worth of books a month, every month. Then I built Kindlepreneur. I built a software called Publisher Rocket. And then, and so these things started to really trickle, and each business led to another business. And I was able to move to Franklin, Tennessee about 5 years ago. And here I am working from home every day.
Very cool. I live in Knoxville, so I'm not too far from you, man.
There you go.
3 hours. Yeah.
Nice.
So, and I travel a lot. So I'm over in that Nashville area. I love it over there. Brentwood, Franklin, at Cool Springs area, Spring Hill, we've got, we got a mutual friend over there. Sean and I do.
Yeah.
So
David and David and, David's over there in Franklin.
Spring Hill. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he's in Spring Hill. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's awesome, man. You got, so how long again were you selling international arms? I mean, what
I was pretty much in the position for about 5 years. I did a lot in Southeast Asia. My favorite of all was the Maldives, which is super cool. I don't know if you guys know that, but it's one of the top scuba diving destinations. It's also where the end of the movie Rogue One is filmed. Right in the beach scene. Yeah. And a little fun fact is that when they wrapped up that Star Wars Rogue One, the ambassador was furious, like he was pissed, and he knew that I was going over to deal with the MNDF, which is Maldivian National Defense Force, MNDF, on something. And he immediately calls me into his office. He's like, "Oh, you better tell them that if a U.S. company is going to do something like that, they need to get my approval." And I was like, "Got it, sir. Yep. Okay. Hey, I'm sure I'm going to tell General Shahid that you're pissed." Yeah, this is so. Anyways, but I'm a diehard Star Wars fan, so to find out that they had been there filming and I didn't know, I was like, I'm hurt.
Yeah.
So I got there and I was talking, and General Shahid was their minister of defense, and I'm sitting at the table, and there's him who's a 4-star, and then there's all of his stars, just all of the different generals, kind of lined up at the table, and there's me with my assistant, and all of a sudden I look over and I'm like, sir, I understand, because I knew that the AT-AT walkers were in the movie, the big 4-legged things,
right?
And so I look over and I'm like, sir, my understanding is you guys need some sort of device to help repel large battery systems coming up on your shores. And all of a sudden, and I knew he was a jokester, but the other guys start freaking out. They're like, what does the US know? Like, what's going on? Like, and they're calling over there, because this was just out of left park. All of a sudden, General Shahid just starts laughing like he's Jabba. He's like, oh, Mr.
That's
Chesson,
awesome.
if I had known that you were a Star Wars fan, I would have had you in the movie. And I was like, sir, you can't tell me that. He was like, they had the problem. The stormtroopers, they needed them tall, but we're not tall. There were not many we could find. And I'm like, sir, you got to be kidding me. You can't tell me this. He was like, yeah, they couldn't find anybody. So they actually got all the special forces. There's 24 of them there.
Yeah.
And those are actually the extras in the movie. So all of the stormtroopers and the rebels, those guys are trained killers. Like, those are like phenomenal soldiers. And they were telling me, because I'd go scuba diving with them, because you can't drink in the Maldives, but I'd go scuba diving with them. And they would tell me, yeah, we'd be on the beach. And the director kept saying, aim higher, because they don't know Star Wars. They don't get it. So he's like, aim higher, aim higher. They just, there you go. What? So anyways, that was like my one thing. But what I will say, though, is that the landing pad where they filmed that movie was on where the special forces actually trains. It's the only place that you can explode stuff, because their islands are very protected. And on that is that landing pad. And my office built that for their defense forces. So I love the little Star Wars in me always likes to say, well, I have supplied weapons to the Empire, so I got that going for me, which is
nice.
That's a great story.
Yeah, I think your autobiography could have been a stormtrooper,
right? I could totally
miss.
That's
a great title.
Yeah,
I am absolutely great at missing, so I think I would have been a natural.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, if you were a stormtrooper, that would have fit you perfectly, because they're always great at missing. They never hit a target.
Miss and then fall. I can do
that. So there's so
cool. Yeah.
There's two things you said earlier, Dave, that I wanted to unpack a little bit for our listeners, kind of around negotiation and persuasion and things like that. You kind of glossed over them, but I think they're kind of cool. And one was be best friends with translators. I could see that applying in a lot of different situations. And then finding common ground.
Yes.
So why don't we unpack those a little bit for our listeners?
So the thing is that a translator can make or break your international negotiations very quickly. There's a lot of instances in history where this almost destroyed relationships with nations. There's a famous incident where Stalin met with Mao Zedong, and Mao said to Stalin, which we all know that relation didn't go well later. Mao said, our friendship is like an old boot. The problem was that, the translator didn't understand the colloquialism. And so he translated that basically said, you're a worn out boot. And where Mao is saying it's like friendly boot that's worn into your foot and it's comfortable.
Sure.
And there's a lot of people that mark that as the first time where Stalin looked and it's like, nope, this is not going to work out. And again, it can just come down to something like that. But even more so, I also found too, is that if a translator likes you or has better respect for you, they may choose more respectful ways to say things, or they may err on the side of something that will work better for you. And so I found that if you ever have to deal with a translator, don't just treat them like a sounding board. Don't treat them like a tool. Treat them like your friend. Talk to them like they're your friend. They're the best to understand your colloquialisms or your mannerisms, because they hopefully have studied your culture a bit more than the others in the room. and they can make that twist if they so choose. So A, make them your friend. B, the other thing is that the translators, especially if you're not with the party, the important people, and you're just with the translator can be a really good, insightful person. They can tell you a bit more about the person that you're going to be talking with. They can share a lot of excellent information. I remember the first time that I was meeting with South Korean Admiralty, they explained to me the custom that you should not ever pour your drink. As a matter of fact, take that instance to pour their drink. So over the years, I actually learned how to get them drunk without me getting drunk. Because otherwise, when you pour them a drink, then they pour you a drink. And then you go, soju to soju, and you're never going to outlast them. So instead, there's some drinking tips. I could get into that later. But they gave me that understanding. And immediately from the first step, I knew what to do. And I knew that it wasn't weird to pour another guy's drink. In America, that might be, but not there.
Sure.
It's actually accepted. So you can really gain a lot of key insight as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that applies to Jonathan. I know we have gatekeepers you've got to get through at industrial companies. When you're working with team members on a team, they have more insight into, if you're a freelancer, a lot of our listeners are freelancers, things like that. If you can get in with a team member that maybe is a little bit lower level, they can give you a lot of insight to how the company works, how to get your projects pushed through. I've always found that, like, I try to be nice to, in copyright, and be nice to the graphic designers, be nice to, everybody across the board. I mean, it's just a good policy anyway. Yeah. Because you find that your stuff gets moved. Even when I was in sales, your applications, your paperwork gets moved to the top of the pile. If you take the people in the office that process the paperwork, like lunch or coffee or something like that, every once in a while, you'll find that your stuff kind of moves to the top of the pile and gets processed quicker.
Another thing too that I learned is when reading a room, more than likely the person that you think is actually in charge isn't necessarily the person that's going to sway the decision. I found that the 4-star is not going to know specifically what parts he needs for a C-130. He won't know that, but there's some guy in that room that will. And he's the one who's really going to make the call. So I would say that not just the translator in this respect, but sometimes look at the room and don't look at the highest ranking or the person you think is making the decision. Somebody else might honestly be making the decision.
Sure.
It's just the authority of somebody else to finalize it. And so don't go into a meeting just thinking that that's the case. And so, yeah, if you treat the translator or you treat that person, especially the entry, point or, whatever it is, that trickles up. And I've always found that that's actually the best route in order to make changes in a group decision.
Yeah.
Yeah. I found that too, like, because a good especially if it's a well-run company, it's a good leadership, they're going to respect the opinions of the people around them. So they're going to ask, hey, should we do this or not do this? What's your opinion? They'll make the final decision, but there's a lot of sway
I've
there.
always found that to be the case. I've got a friend that he's retired IBM, and he used to do, IBM used to teach, and I don't know if they still, train this, but you always go to the top, to what you perceive as the decision maker. But, to me, like you said, that can be a little misleading, because just because the guy that's at the top of the pyramid, you assume that he's making the decisions, but he's usually taking a lot of feedback from other people that are below him. And if you skip those people or you leave those people out in the negotiation, they can get cross, and that could basically sabotage everything. So I've never liked that whole method of bypassing, because you can really upset a lot of people along the way that'll just kind of, pull the rug out from under you at the last minute.
100%. One of my favorite parts in the movie Moneyball is when Brad Pitt goes up and he's trying to make this deal. And he's like, it sounds good. And then all of a sudden the guy on the other side of the table looks over at Jonah Hill, and Jonah Hill just like, no, and then, nope, can't do that one. And he tries another deal, looks over at Jonah Hill. Nope, can't do that one. So Brad Pitt walks out and he's like, all right, that's it. Some cubicle nerd just crushed 2 of my deals. What gives? And I want to buy you. Like, I mean, to me, it was like one of my favorite parts, because immediately he realized that this guy had such favor for some reason that he was clearly able to make the call and down a deal. And in truth, when you have a group, especially if you go into a meeting with a group of people, they bring a group because they want more people to have a say. And I've always found there's always that one Jonah Hill somewhere in there. So like, as I'm talking with the group, maybe I try to know this before I go in, but if I don't, I like to look at the eye contact that the lead is making. All right. If he's not looking at me. So when I'm talking to somebody and he's looking over, or naturally, if he starts to think and he's looking at somebody, then immediately I'm starting to be like, all right, he clearly is looking at that guy. And that guy is clearly looking back at him and so I can start to see these tells to know, yep, he's going to rely on him to make this decision, which means that I need to get with him after this and get him a bourbon.
That's right. And that was in Moneyball because they kept looking over at Jonah Hill and he would just like shake his head and then he would say, no, that's not going to work. And so it's like,
and they chose to bring him into the meeting. And I think that's the key. You don't bring, you don't leave your prize horse in the stable. You bring it out on the race. And I think that's a big part of how people like to do it, especially if a group setting. Now, if you get a one-on-one, then clearly there's only one person making that decision. But people bring a team because they want it for some reason. And that's one thing that you should dissect as you go in there.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a great point. So talk to us a little bit about, because you've got a unique perspective on finding common ground, just because of the number of people involved in the types of transactions you were doing. And then, as you talk about that, kind of how we might apply it elsewhere.
Yeah, common ground isn't a thing where you just read somebody's dossier or maybe gain intel. It really doesn't work out that well. I've always thought, oh, wow, this guy likes American baseball. Great. That's common ground, and maybe that gets them talking, but that does nothing. What I've always found is, I really love labeling. I love asking questions. I like to investigate. Matter of fact, the best thing you can do is ask somebody about themselves because people love to talk about themselves. And the more you ask, the more you show that you're interested, the more you'll find out. And if you just keep doing that, you're going to find some areas, you're going to find motivations, you're going to find common ground on which to build a deal. So I generally try to start off where most people call it small talk. It's actually me investigating into who this person really is and what it is that actually motivates them. And I do that by labeling. Oh, it seems like you're really excited about this meeting. Oh, it seems like you're really excited about that bottle. Why don't we pour some? And then they start explaining why they're really excited for that bottle at 11 a.m. But, so be it. But when you start doing that, and you really continue to put it on them to talk about them and to talk about something, in that respect, they just start opening up and they start saying more. And that really helps me to understand why they're really here, what they really want. And so I think that can be a really excellent opportunity to build significant common ground and know where you should approach the real, quote unquote, negotiations aspect is by doing those things from the beginning.
Yeah. I'm curious, was this part of military training? Did you learn this in the school? Like when you said you're getting your MBA, I think, or something like, where did you pick these different things up? Because you've got a unique background. I'm curious where you learned the training or if it was just kind of survival.
Yeah, you're going to laugh at this, but I think a lot of what I learned was actually in a fraternity.
Okay.
You probably weren't expecting that. I
was not expecting that, but that's fine.
I started a fraternity in college. I joined Sigma Pi at Miami of Ohio, and then I transferred over to Wisconsin. They didn't have one, so I started it. And I found that trying to convince poor college kids they should donate a whole bunch of money and actually get organized and do extra work required a lot of recruiting and a lot of, I don't think it's manipulation. That's a terrible word, but you have to be really smart about how you approach it and how you organize and keep them happy. And by the end of it, we had about 130. We were actually living in a Frank Lloyd Wright house right on the lake. So I would say it was a great learning experience. And I really take a lot of that with me as I entered into the military. And then I think the other thing was that being so young or looking so young, even more so, it was kind of a sink or swim situation. And I also leaned on foreign nationals that worked with me, who, you know, to really gain insight and to understand. I think a lot of people jump into the job and they think, well, my job is to do this, and so they do it. But for me, it was important to understand the context of everything.
Hmm.
You know, I talked about the C-130 parts, and that was like, oh man, that was a minefield.
Yeah.
A little bit about it is that, you know, you give countries like planes, you know, C-130s, great, cool. But most of them don't want anything else. Like, they want to pay for the C-130 and that's it. The problem is they need a crap ton of parts. Like, I mean,
Right.
they need a supply chain. On top of that, they need education and training. And a lot of times they just want to cut that out of the package. Now, that wasn't exactly the case in this one particular country. But in the end, though, they had a major supply shortage. And it was because they didn't want the supply package. And whoever sold it to them went with the easy route and sold it without it. But now they blame us because their C-130s won't fly. And it's,
Hmm.
oh, that's because you didn't want the parts. And so it was a bit
Right.
contentious. But knowing that that was the case, and knowing that this was years of issues, and there's other issues that I can't go into here,
Hmm.
it helped me to navigate the understanding that I'm not the one in charge on this one. I'm
Yeah.
actually to blame. My office is to blame, not for what they're going to blame me for, but for something else. And that is a systemic issue that we must address. But I also must do a accusation audit, you know, stepping into the first negotiation, just saying, I understand that we failed to get you parts. I understand, you know, that it feels like we haven't supported you like we said we would. I understand that you believe that the United States has left you to dry. I know that you feel, as you know, and so just taking away all of those things that they have a problem with right from the beginning lets them know, you know, kind of put them on the, oh, well, okay, I guess I don't need to come in and tell this young whippersnapper what's going on.
Yeah, that's a
And so
great
these
point.
kind of things really help me out in
Right.
getting it. Now, what's funny is I never had any formal training. It wasn't until after I was done with the job that I actually started training under Black Swan, Chris
Mm.
Foss's company. I did a lot because I've been doing a lot of business negotiations, some buyouts, some mergers, and things like that. And I figured that, you know, wouldn't it be nice if I actually had a word for some of the things I've been doing? And so it's been glorious. I've really enjoyed that training.
Chris Voss of Never Split the Difference, right?
That's correct.
I
Yep.
love that book.
Yeah.
Excellent book. Phenomenal training. They have
Mhm.
courses, they have coaching. Worth every penny in my mind.
Yeah, I've taken his. I've gone through his. He's got a master class, which is really good
Yep.
too. I mean, it's just phenomenal. So, and I've recommended that master class for people that, if they can't read the book, I'm like, dude, go over to the master class, download the app, and jump on that class right away. It's just, it's really good. So,
Absolutely.
Well, before we shift to Kindlepreneur, what's the number one thing you took away and learned is in those arms dealers days? Number one lesson.
So, but while you're thinking about that, I'm going to follow up a question to Sean. And what's a takeaway? And I would be interested to know something you can talk about that's not top secret, obviously, that with the most tense negotiation situation that you ever dealt with, because I love those type of stories.
Boy, I'm gonna have to skirt around so much on that.
Yeah. I figured as much. You can't share everything, but you could drop some names. You could, you know, we don't have to know names.
All right. Well, the first thing,
countries.
The most important thing I ever learned was always under promise and over deliver. Oh my Lord. If you ever over promise and you can't deliver on what you over promise, you are done. And I mean done, not just in the fact that the deal didn't go through, but from that point on, you'll never be trusted. Whereas if you under promise and over deliver, they just have you at a much higher standard. So I was always very key to figure three things out. What would be the over promise? What is what I actually think will happen? And then I develop what the thing is that I'm going to tell them that sounds good enough, but not great. And so I would always go into the meeting and say the good enough, but not great by this time. That's not good, or not great, but good. And I think that got my foot in the door for future meetings way easier, had better relationships than if I had told them what I thought and then delivered on exactly what I thought. You see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
for me to say that, yeah, we can do it here, and then I get it there, that just set the
Sure.
tone for days to come. So I was very happy with how that really worked out. So I would always say really think about those 3 levels, hit the lower one and deliver on the middle one.
Sure.
It greases the tracks for future negotiations
That's
and relationship building.
Yeah, it's
As
good for
for-
it's good. It's good for dating and marriage too.
Yeah, that's right. As for, well,
Most tense negotiation setting.
well, I'm not going to say tense because I can't really go into those,
Challenge.
but I'll say the pucker value was so high, like on my head.
Right.
No, I can't tell that one. That one's probably
Darn.
Mark's secret. There's another pucker value one where the ambassador, I'm not going to say what country,
Okay.
the U.S. ambassador wanted to go to another section of the country,
Mhm.
and he wanted a U.S. Military flight. And there's a reason why he wanted this particular type of plane to take him, as well as as well as like the Minister of Defense, the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, and Minister. So like of this country, he wanted them all to get on this thing and to fly somewhere and have this big ribbon cutting thing right in front of everybody. Well, it takes a lot of bureaucracy in order to put a foreign national, especially a super powerful foreign national, onto a U.S. military flight.
Yeah.
Because of like what happens if something bad happens, what happens
Sure.
if the plane crashes, like you have an international incident on your
Right.
hands. And the ambassador, like within a day or two, was like, Mr. Trusted, you can do this, right? Under promise, over deliver.
That's right.
Probably not, sir. Because there was no good way to say it. I'm like,
That's right.
probably not. He looks over at me. He's like, Mr. Chesson, I don't care what you have to do. You're going to make it happen. Okay. And I'm like, oh, yep, got it. I think at that point, let's just say that I cashed in every favor I ever had. And I got on the phone. I knew who to talk to. I knew who could grease the tracks.
Sure.
Luckily, it was at the end of a tour, so that I knew everybody. And
Nice.
I somehow got us all on that plane, and we flew, and it went off without a hitch. But I remember the entire time thinking, this is career ending. Like, if the ambassador doesn't get this, and I mean, it was one of those things where I tried to underpromise, and he just wasn't going to have it.
Yeah.
It was like, you either deliver or you're out of the country. And so anyways, I know that wasn't, if I'd given more details, I think it would have been a more entertaining story, but I can't go too far into it.
No, but that puts you can sense the challenge because
the optics of it were so important. And I think the optics is probably one of the biggest things, especially in engagement in politics. It was about the idea of first off, them agreeing to do this was huge. And then if we were going to be like, oh, we can't put you on this, like that would have just blown up visually. Right.
Sure.
And they would have been pissed. So like, I think the ambassador overpromised, and he was holding me to over deliver.
Sure.
And I think that's why it was so bad of a situation. But with them walking off of this particular platform hand in hand in front of a crowd and doing what they did, it was like the greatest strategic symbol. It was excellent. And I passed out afterwards. I'm not gonna lie, I got hammered.
You were exhausted emotionally.
No,
it
got
drained
hammered.
you.
They had a whole bunch of my favorite kind of drink at the celebration. I was like, I earned it. I got amnesty, the ambassador and the Secretary of State are here and they're happy with me.
That's right, man. Awesome.
So that's how I rolled.
That's cool. Well, let's talk about publishing, man. So tell us a little bit about your company, what you're doing. I'm fascinated with this because I published a few books. Publishing has changed a lot just in the last 10 years. You talked about a little bit about your background there when you're making about $15,000 a month or something like that, just publishing books. Maybe it was more than that, but I'm interested, what kind of got you into book publishing and then kind of launching this business that you have now, helping others, I guess would be or soon to be authors get their book kind of out there.
Yeah, well, I think what really got me started was when I was in Korea, we were trying to find some way to build some kind of business where I could go to work during the day, that I could sell things. It didn't require me. And so I really got into building websites, and SEO and ranking number one in Google. And then I started looking at Amazon, and Amazon had their Kindle Direct Publishing, this ability that you could self-publish your own book on the world's largest book market. Well, someone like me, I'm not some, Ernest Hemingway. I can't write anything I want. But one thing I have learned, though, is that if you know that everybody at a party deeply wants to know the answer to this one question, and if you know the answer to that question, you're the life of the party. Whether or not you're the best orator or whether you're fun, it doesn't matter. Everybody wants to hear what you want to say.
Right.
So I started analyzing Amazon's market and saying to myself, well, geez, if I could just understand where there is a desire to learn something and there isn't a supply, then I can create that. So I started using my SEO background, started analyzing what makes Amazon tick. And I started really developing books that were geared exactly towards that. And it really took off. As a matter of fact, the first book I ever wrote was on a South Korean warship called the Yugogi-e, which to me is always a fun thing to say. But
yeah, I've been looking for that book recently. I'm glad you mentioned it.
Yeah. Well, it's crazy because you truly can write a book from anywhere.
Sure.
And you really don't have to be Ernest Hemingway, but it is definitely a skill that grows over time. The more you write, the better it gets. And the same thing for book marketing. And so when I saw that there was nobody really covering any of that information, I immediately got to work on creating Kindlepreneur, an advanced book marketing website that teaches people about self-publishing. And that really took off. And then because I was always talking about data analytics and trying to understand market trends, that's where I developed a software called Publisher Rocket, which is a book marketing software that helps people to see what people are searching for, best categories, and those sorts of things. And so that's really taken off. And those were my two entry points into entrepreneurism.
That's really cool.
Very nice. So yeah, I was poking around on your site, and you got some pretty cool stuff. We'll put out a kind of a call for your secret VIP page here at the end of the show, but some good stuff on there. What would how did you said you had some SEO background, but could you like break that down a little bit more for people? Let's say if I think a lot of people are naturally going to start in the world that they're in. Did you do that? Or did you just go straight from the data and let the data tell you what to write? Or did you kind of go with stuff you were already interested in? How did that first book or two go?
Well, I tried once just sitting down and writing something that I really wanted to write. And, that one definitely didn't take off. Just creating a book and then putting it out there is really like it's almost like you're playing the lottery at that point. It doesn't mean that you can't write the book you want, but understanding how to kind of angle it or to introduce it so that it has, some real traction, I think is a very key point. And I call it book idea validation. An example of this is like way back in the day, there used to be these there was a software still kind of around, but it was called Evernote. It was super popular at the time. And people were buying books like crazy on how to use Evernote. Well, here's the thing. You could be one of the other 120 books on how to use Evernote. And if you do that, maybe you'll make some sales, but more than likely you'll fall to the bottom and nothing happens.
Sure.
You're not going to, you either have to be a better marketer than every one of those 120 authors, or you have to literally have the best book and somehow word gets out that it's the best book. Right. I started looking at that market and saying, okay, well, I still want to write on Evernote because I use it a lot. And when I would look into it and do my research, I would find out that, wow, there are actually a lot of people that are not just typing in Evernote or how to use Evernote. They're going into Amazon and they're looking for Evernote for authors, Evernote for students, Evernote for teachers, Evernote for project managers. And when I did enough of the research, I found, well, yeah, some people type that in, but a lot of people type this in. So now I can take this book and I can angle it towards a particular demographic. And now I'm the only book that serves that market.
Sure.
And when I had that, that really gave me that angle. That didn't force me to have to be the best book marketer out there in order to gain it. And since I was the only one, I mean, if you typed in Evernote for authors and Amazon presents only one book that says Evernote for authors and the rest are just Evernote, guess who's going to get that sale?
Sure.
It doesn't matter if your cover isn't better than everybody else's. You're speaking to them. And so that was a tactic that really helped me to get my foot in the door, helped me to really build out, to kind of develop that writing. And then other tactics like, convincing people to sign up for the email list, cultivating future buys on different products, building better momentum on the next book and the next book because of all these things together. That really helped to allow me to build up to $15,000, $20,000 a month in book sales, without requiring new books or more books to come out.
Right. No, I get that. That's the more specific, because I mean, people are looking for specific answers. And I guess my curiosity makes me want to say, how, if I'm publishing a book that's very niche oriented into, say, Evernote or, something that I want to teach that's very specific, not like everybody else. How long does that book? I mean, typically, what are we looking at in terms of length? And when you're creating that or putting that together, what constitutes a book? I would assume a lot of these are Kindle based books that people are buying, digitally. But what would constitute, what's the number of pages or how much content do you need in something like that to constitute to call it a book?
Well, to answer that question, I'm gonna kind of answer it in a sideways way. I've worked with a lot of publishing companies and as a consultant, and sitting in some of their meetings for how they decide which books they're going to sign. One of the things I found was they kind of have their own understanding of what their particular market wants. So say, for example, you're trying to get your book published by some particular publishing company. Best thing you can do is go find books that they've published that are near the subject you're doing and look at how many pages that is. It sounds really weird, but they would like to buy or publish a book that fits their mold. I would say that for anybody who's self-publishing, go ahead and look at some of the most popular books, look at how much they're covering as well as how many pages, and that can give you a good indication of where you should target. Not that you have to hit that, but that should answer. So in some cases like Evernote, I would, and again, this is an old long-term thing, but back in the day, if you wrote a 90,000 word book on Evernote, it probably wouldn't have done well, whereas if you're looking at 30,000, that's, 30 to 45,000, that's kind of a sweet spot for where that was back in the day. Right. It's accepted that 90,000 is usually on fiction, but certain genres have larger or smaller. And so I would say just do that research and look at the most popular ones and use that as kind of your guidance.
Okay. That's fascinating. What's about the software? I'm curious on that. You talked about the software. What is that called again?
Publisher Rocket.
Publisher Rocket. Is that a paid monthly subscription, paid upfront,
No,
one-time fee?
One-time fee. I personally hate subscriptions. And so it's always, everybody's like, I can't believe you don't do subscription. I'm like, because I hate them. Like, I get to run my company how I want other companies to go.
Absolutely.
It's a one-time fee of $97. And basically it analyzes Amazon. It tells you what people type into Amazon, how many people type it per month, how much money books are making that show up for that term, the competition score. So like how hard would it be to beat that book based off of, historical data and finance.
That's really cool.
Yeah. It's just, we also have a list of every one of the Amazon categories. There's 11,000 categories on Amazon.
Wow.
Whereas when you go to publish your book, you select out of the 4,000 that they show you. So for authors, if you don't know about those other, 6,000-7,000 categories that are out there, you're going to just get put in the most competitive ones. And the way that it works in Amazon is to become an Amazon bestseller. All you have to do is be in a category where in that day you sold more books than any other book. Out of 11,000 categories, there are some categories out there that would fit your book and only requires 1 or 2 sales a day and you hit bestseller status. So again, it's kind of just pulling back the curtain of Amazon and helping self-publishers get the information that publishers have thrived off of for years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Do you when you were writing your own, do you still write, or do you just still write your books?
I do. I don't write as many books as I used to. Instead, though, I spend a lot of my time writing on Kindlepreneur, but also on Gun University, and then kind of working programs. Actually, we just launched a new software company 2 days ago called Atticus.io. So I've been working inside of that one. So yeah, it's still writing, just not writing as many books as I used to.
Yeah. Did you ever use ghostwriters, or just always found you wrote it yourself?
I tried that. And I did it once where I basically said, here's the subject. And it was a crap. I could not, I was going to spend more time fixing it than I would have gotten anything out of it.
Sure.
Then I once did this, and this kind of worked. And I think this is my recommendation to anybody who ever does a ghostwriting, because if you're going to put your name on it, you gotta nail it. I like to basically write the skeleton and have them fill out the flesh. So in this case, every chapter has already been laid out, and sometimes, and this, I think it was John Grisham who used to do this, where he would write the intro to each chapter, and whoever was the ghostwriter would come in and fill in the rest. It was one of the famous authors.
James Patterson. James Patterson did that. Yeah, that's how he got his, his people to write. I think he just said he did a 25 to 50 page outline.
There you go. Yeah,
and then they just fill it in.
So you basically put in that beginning, you give your layout, and then at that point then you get the story you want. For me, I liked, especially in nonfiction, one of my biggest recommendations to writing nonfiction is speak in stories. Don't speak in information. Nobody, what is it? The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, right? Written by, boy, why am I blanking?
Maxwell.
John C. Maxwell.
Yeah.
John C. Maxwell, right?
Yeah.
The thing about it is he didn't come up with a new leadership law. Nothing was new there. But why it took off is because I still remember, a Ray Kroc story in McDonald's and his thing about, the cup half filled, or, the potential of a leader. And, the McDonald brothers, or McDonald, could only go this far, but Ray Kroc, his potential was up here.
Sure.
I know it because of the story. And the best way to teach somebody is through story. So I try to, when I do nonfiction, when I do my outlining, I like to find, I'll lay out the lessons that I want to do, and then I will find a story, either historical, a personal, something to put right there in the beginning that will help to exemplify what they're going to learn in that chapter. I have found that even if the lesson isn't amazing or mind-blowing, the fact that people were entertained throughout the nonfiction book only leads to higher reviews, sticks longer in their mind. They think of you when they're thinking of this subject matter more so than the one that was dry and cut.
Yep.
That's my favorite.
It's like anchors. Speakers use that all the time because they, they'll tie their speaking. They'll tie, stories to each of their lessons or each of their points throughout their, whatever speech they're making, and those are like anchors that kind of, really pull their message home to their audience and get them to remember it.
I think
exactly.
Robert Greene, I guess technically it was Ryan Holiday at this point, but we all know now. But Robert Greene's books were like that, where he used a historical story, got you into the story, and then applied, pulled a lesson from the story that's been there for 200 years.
Yeah.
And I think it's a brilliant way to write a book, because it's it's almost indisputable. It's hard for people to argue with it because it's history. Or it's just harder to argue with stories than anything else.
Sure.
Yeah, there's studies showing that people learn better through a story. Plus, on top of that, too, people honestly want to be entertained. You may go to the history section because you want to learn about World War II, but in truth, you want to be entertained. And if an author in nonfiction doesn't remember to entertain their readers, they're going to lose them. Even if the information is great, even if the research is amazing, but if you can't weave the story, you're going to lose them.
If you think about probably one of the best nonfiction books of the last, 30, 40 years, 7 Habits, Highly Effective People. If you were to ask people to tell you something about that book, they would probably pull out one of the stories. The one that jumps to my mind first is him sitting on the train, where he shows the paradigm shift by the father's kids are running around on the subway train, misbehaving. And he feels like, he shouldn't be doing like that. And then he talks to the guy and finds out his wife just died. They came from the hospital, and how it changed his whole outlook on that person. And like, I mean, that's stuck with me for 30 years because that book's, it's an old book.
Right.
But those are what stick out. Like I could not name the 7 principles.
You couldn't name the habits, but you could name that story. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the way it goes, because there's several stories like that throughout the book. So
yeah, Chris Voss's book on Never Split the Difference is a great example of this too.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, what's powerful about each chapter is him starting about a hostage negotiation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like, every time I like to listen to books on Audible, but every time I'm listening to that, I'm like, oh man, high stakes, I'm in. And then it's like, oh, that's cool. He did that.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yep.
I just learned that. And I think that if he had taken out those stories and he had just, instead of making it sound like it was a very entertaining point, I don't think we would even know his name today. I don't think he'd be masterclass. I don't think he'd be doing all those things.
That's right.
So
absolutely.
I think the stories are what really carried his great information and made him into what he is today.
Yeah.
I actually just downloaded a book today on Audible from Richard Koch. And it's the same way. It's got historical references and then he pulls his points. But the whole thesis of the book is like all unreasonably successful people share these 9 qualities. And then he goes throughout history and shows what these 9 qualities are by telling stories. And a lot of times he gets into some nuances about these characters that you thought you knew because they're well-known historical characters. So it's like, so it's that form of entertaining, for us that like nonfiction books.
Yeah.
Learning these little tidbits is entertainment. Like it's just something we can brag about at a cocktail party or tell somebody else or whatever. So it's a great point. Make your nonfiction entertaining.
That's right.
Bingo.
Last question for me, just on publishing. Sean and I talk about this a little bit. I'm curious what the latest stats are from people that buy physical books to Kindle, because I know, you can see behind us, we like to buy a lot of books, but we're also kind of old school. We like to hold books and actually highlight and stuff like that. I know a lot of people download Kindle. So is there a trend coming back to like physical books? Cause I know Kindles, or is it, 50-50, 60-40? I mean, what do you see that's the predominant preference for most people that are buying books today, especially these how-to, nonfiction type books?
I was going to say, it really depends on the genre.
Yeah.
For example, erotica and, romance are very high selling in Amazon, but I would say that like a mass majority of them are ebook. And I mean, if you think about it, right, how, especially if it's erotica, how many women want to be holding on the train a book that shows, the guy without his shirt on. I remember like being a kid when they had that like Harlequin, books, and every time I was like, look at the lady, even as a kid, I was like, ugh, okay. Yeah. I mean, I always jokingly say it's like porn for women, but clearly they don't want the cover if they're sitting there in a meeting. Like it could be, A Tale of Two Cities for all you know, instead of A Tale of Two Men. But they just kind of want. They
say that's one of the reasons 50 Shades of Grey was so successful.
Yeah.
It was because people couldn't tell that they were reading it. So people talked about it, but it was not something they wanted to know anybody they were reading, even though everybody was reading it.
Exactly. Yeah. And so you find that a lot with that. Also, too, there's a lot of serial readers who absolutely love fiction, a certain genre of fiction. I mean, these people eat up a lot of books. And to be able to either do KU, Kindle Unlimited, where they pay into a program and then they can download as many of certain books that they want. That way they can get their fix. So that really drives a lot of ebook reading right there. The other thing too is it's a lot easier to rent books on a library through these EPUB versions. So that's really kind of swung it over to the right. I think with nonfiction, especially with heady or very informational books, I think more people are still going back to the paperback in that respect, because like you said, it's taking notes, it's sitting and thinking through it.
Sure.
Whereas if it's like something digestible where I just want to read for entertainment, those tend to shift more towards EPUB or ebooks.
Right.
But I say the biggest thing that's really been taken off, the industry that's really been taken over, is audiobooks. Audiobooks have increased every year. Amazon is heavily invested in those, and people. I would say that if you're an author and you're thinking, oh well, my ebook or physical book didn't do well, maybe it will do well in audio. No, don't go down that route. But if you do have a successful book and ebook, might as well look at converting it into an audiobook so that you now have another, income stream as well as another source of a market, because some people won't read a book. They'll only listen. I'll admit, I do not read fiction. I listen to it, and I crush out a lot of books every week, but I read nonfiction. And so if you have a phenomenal fiction book and I get to it and you don't have an audio version of it, cool, looks awesome, moving on. There's a lot of fish in the sea.
Yeah, I'm the same way. We use Audible. I think Sean, you use Audible too, right? And it's like that with me. Like mostly, like if they're stories, if they're fictional books, like every day, just like Audible, because there's no way I'm gonna order a fictional book and read through it. It's easier to listen to, and sometimes you can adjust the speed on it and go faster.
Oh yeah,
depending on the book. Yep. Yep, absolutely. Man, this has been cool. We've really enjoyed having you on today. I guess tell us a little bit about how people can find out more about you, Dave. I'm assuming your site over at Kindlepreneur, people can find the more about you, what you're doing. And then also can they access your software there too? Or is that like a different location?
Yeah, we have free tools on Kindlepreneur as well, but we also have Publisher Rocket at publisherrocket.com.
Okay.
But you could also hit me up on Gun University, the contact page there as well.
Another cool site.
Yeah.
Because I'm a gun enthusiast. So
I'll say, so I was doing a little background before the show. So for the listeners, I would go to Kindlepreneur, put in your email address, and get access to the secret VIP page. Some cool stuff, especially for our listeners. There's some cool stuff on there, some templates and some cheat sheets that I think are really, really cool. So definitely go there.
Okay,
very cool, man. Last question. You're a Star Wars fan. Favorite Star Wars movie? Which one?
Ooh. Well, I mean, Empire Strikes Back is easily it, but I'm going to shock some people and say that my favorite Star Wars movie since after the originals, I'm going to go with Solo. And I know that there are a lot of people that are going to think I'm terrible for saying this, but when I talk about movies, there's a critical level and there's an entertainment level. Okay.
Yeah.
We've all watched critically acclaimed movies that are like, oh my gosh, that's amazing, but you won't rewatch it.
Right.
I say that's a high critical score, super low entertainment score.
Yeah.
Well, when it comes to Solo, I'm not going to argue with somebody saying, critically, that sucks. Okay. But it's the most rewatchable of all the new ones. I love the more I watch it, the more I'm entertained. Rogue One, phenomenal critical, not very rewatchable. Solo, totally fun. And I think it's campy like the originals. I know a lot of people disagree with me, but that's all right.
I think it follows a little bit more of the Marvel theme to the humor and the other things,
Sure.
Because it came out, in the middle of all this Marvel mania. And I think they took some clues from that as well.
Yeah.
Really going into one character, and I think it's a great way to do it. So I agree. I liked it too. It was fun. All right.
Empire Strikes Back.
Yep.
So my two are Return of the Jedi, Empire Strikes. I think I would go Return of the Jedi.
You just like the Ewoks. That's it.
I love the Ewoks.
Yeah.
How can you not?
I think
Jabba, the whole Jabba thing. I think the Leia Jabba thing, I don't know. It's like I was a kid.
You're a teenage boy.
All right. Yeah. Well, Dave, it's been fun, man. Thanks for joining us today on this episode. And we look forward to getting all your information out. We'll send you a link once we get it out. And thanks again, man. It's been a blast. We're going to send you to the green room just for a second while we wrap up. If you got a couple of seconds, we'll bring you back up right when we finish out.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks again, man. Good stuff. As always, Dave Chesson. You can find him over at Gun University. You can find him at Kindlepreneur. And again, Sean will be posting the links, man. Good takeaways on publishing too, man. I love that. I wasn't really expecting that until we went down that road. And man, the search tool, I got to check that out.
Yeah. Sounds right up your alley.
Yep.
All righty.
All right, guys, you can find us over at Persuasion by the Pint, as always, persuasionbythepint.com. You can find us on all of your podcast platforms, Stitcher Radio, iHeart. Leave us 5 stars. We greatly appreciate it. And we'll see you guys. We got a great upcoming episode, a follow-up episode coming up here soon. And so stay tuned. Thanks a lot.
See ya.
All right.